My name is Zainab Avni. I'm an alliance. I always think, what should I say about myself, really? But I like to say that I use the emotion code, the body code, and belief code to help people heal or reduce the symptoms from chronic conditions. And this podcast, Healing Conversations for Anything Chronic, is really here to inspire people to find ways to heal themselves naturally. So let me tell you about our guest today. Today I have Katie Jones. Katie, it is wonderful to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So tell me, let's get started. We're going to talk about chronic fatigue, ME, CFS. Tell us something about you. Let's get started.
Okay, so where to start?
Yeah.
So when I was 16, I'm 35 next week. So when I was 16, I had glandular fever, and then I never really recovered after it. And then by 18, I was diagnosed with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. And all I was told by the doctors was basically just adjust your life around it. That's all that I really had. There wasn't much more to it.
Right.
I was also an athlete at the time. I was a Welsh athlete. Every weekend I was racing. I loved it, but I couldn't train anymore. So it was like, not only did I have to deal with this, but I had to somehow learn how to live without running, because like that's all I did was train and race. So over the years, I would always try getting back to running, because I was like, no, I will do it again. But eventually I finally gave up. And I spent 14 years of being ill, like up and down. Obviously, ME is very sort of, sometimes you're okay, like I say okay, like manageable with symptoms, and then sometimes it was severe to the point where I was bedridden, in a wheelchair, crutches, mostly because I suffered with these horrendous tremors and muscle spasms, and I didn't know when they were gonna just appear. So then I became anxious anytime I left the house, because I wouldn't want to go anywhere unless someone was with me, in case my legs decided, no, that's it for today. And I just lived like that for 14 years, and the depression and the anxiety that came with it was quite horrendous at times. And I also had 2 young children. So when I was in my worst part of it, they were about 5 and 3, something like that. So that's tough going. And then I'm married as well, and my husband just had to take on the role of like doing everything at one point, which was a bit of a shock to the system, to him, bless him. But we muddled through.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I was like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, where you're just like, I can't do this anymore. I was so low, like mentally, physically as well. But like, it really got to me. And I just had this moment, like, now I know it's like that spiritual moment, that moment of something more. But at the time, I was like, "Ooh, this is a bit weird. I don't know what's going on." But I just had this knowing that I was destined for more, and I felt it. I knew it.
Mhm.
And from that moment, I started looking at what else can I do then, because I was not proactive. I was totally wallowing in everything that I was living through. And then I just started little things like nutrition first, taking some different supplements, and
But
from
wait.
yeah, go
Let's
on, go on.
pause for a second and get to what you've done, because I think that's obviously very interesting for people. But I also want to just bring us back to a little bit to the beginning and
Yeah,
what you're saying about the chronic fatigue, because I think there's two things that I notice from people that I'm speaking with. Is first of all, it's that diagnosis, right? I mean, you know that there is something that is not right. You know that
yeah,
you not the same as you were,
mm,
and then like you're saying, actually it's not just about really, being exhausted and can't come out of bed or something like that. Actually, you're also describing the spasms and the tremors and your legs not working. So it's so much more than maybe people imagine that this, the chronic fatigue is all about.
yes.
So I am really curious about that. I mean, also 16 is so young, right? It's a
Yeah, yeah. And so as I went on my healing journey and stuff, but I realized when when you track things back, it came to that when I was 15 was when my parents were getting a divorce, and my dad had an affair, and it all kind of like, there was a big sort of emotional thing that had happened. But in our family, we didn't do our emotions. We didn't talk about our emotions. I didn't know how to even say my emotions or name them. I didn't know there were so many until like later on in life. And so it was that was the first thing that we noticed. And then it came the glandular fever, and then I just never recovered because I was holding so much in internally. But we just had no idea how to deal with it because we weren't taught anything growing up in how to deal with anything that you have that is longer than like a week or two of like a cold or a flu. And the emotional effect that had on me was massive because not only did I not know how to deal with what I was living in, I then had to deal with what I was suddenly feeling that wasn't normal, and I didn't know how to explain that either. So it was almost like two things going on, and it was like this battle inside myself, and then the other part of myself where it's like, I'm fine. Yeah, it's not a problem. I can do this. But it's odd because like when I then went out of the house, that was my good days. So if I seen people, they were my good days. So when somebody heard that I was ill and things, they would be like, well, she's not that ill, because last time I saw her, she was fine. She was smiling, she was laughing. I'm like, yeah, because I'm really good at pretending. Like, I've got it mastered. I know how to use humor. I know how to make you feel comfortable. So it's like, it's so interesting how we work to survive.
Yeah. And then that's the other thing, right? It's about also that interaction with other people, and how do you, because you know that you're not doing so well or that you're not feeling so well, but then the interaction is saying something else, and then it must leave a mark on your psyche as well, right? It's like,
Yeah.
how do I dare? Do I say? Do I?
Yeah, especially when you don't know how to say it. Like, you don't know how to say, I am not okay. I need help. So for me, I would see my friends, I pretend I'm fine. I might still, like, I might look ill. There were times where I would have tremors when they were there, but I'd be like, yeah, it's all right. Don't worry about me. I'm surviving, and just brush it off because I didn't know how to say, I really need help and I'm really fucking suffering here. So please just come and help me. Just give me a hug. Just sit with me, something. But I didn't know how to do any of that. And it just became the normal then to act like that and to pretend everything's fine. But also, I didn't want pity. Like, I couldn't ask for help. Oh, and somebody would say, why didn't you just ask for help? I'm like, because I didn't know how. I didn't know I was allowed. Like, it's because that's what I was just brought up in. You get on with it. No matter what you're faced with, you just get on, you plod along, you'll be fine.
And this is really, it's so important that you mentioned that, because I think people feel that a lot, that they can't ask for help. They really need the help. They don't know how to ask it. So it's like waiting for someone to say something that that actually things can move along. But otherwise, it really is just on you, and then you're stuck with whatever got you to where you are now, right? There's no
Yeah,
change.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think until you start sharing it with people, so for me, I lived about 7 years where I just plodded along, and then I went to counselling actually, and he said I was the most positive person he'd seen with ME, and I was like, thanks. And then I realised later in life that I was just putting a mask on, even in my counselling sessions. I was like, I will win you over. You will like me. And but I started sharing on social media then because I kept getting things like, oh, she's not that bad. Oh, I've seen her. Oh, she's just overreact. She's just lazy. She just wants this given to her, and all those sort of things. And I would be like, oh, it's fine. They can say what they want because I know what I'm living with. But there was still that voice inside me going, maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I am being like lazy. And I would doubt myself. So I started sharing it on social media just so people could see what happened behind closed doors, the days that I wasn't out the house, the days that I wasn't seeing people. And I think things started to change then because they were like, oh, shit, she's going through some stuff. But it also helps people feel like they're not alone, because the amount of people that I then had that was like, I'm feeling, I'm not going through what you're going through, but I feel it too, but in a different way. And I think for me, that was just like, oh, okay, so also I'm not alone then. And it was just like a nice way of sharing shit with people so we didn't feel so isolated in our own little homes.
Mm. Would you say now, that ME or the chronic fatigue syndrome, is it impacting? Is it mostly the same for people, or really do they have different extremes,
It's
different?
it's like a scale. So some people can have it and they're just more on the lower end. Some people are so over the other side where they can't even like feed themselves, can't get out of bed, they'll sit in rooms that are like black because they can't do the sensory side of things. But then you can also be this side and then work your way through, end up this side, and it's every day is different.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, so I know of people who were never as severe as what I was, but then I know people that were worse than I was.
mm,
So it's an interesting one of how it's such a variety to it, and different symptoms. Some people don't have some of the symptoms, some people do have all the symptoms. There's so much to it. Like I find that quite fascinating, why nobody's really kind of dived into it more and been like, well, why is it like this? Why do some people have these symptoms, but then all of a sudden some people have these ones? But I also
yeah.
found myself, I was in Facebook groups with ME sufferers, and I found that the more that I was in there, the worse that I was getting,
Mm,
because I'd be like, oh, well, this person's got this. Well, if I'm diagnosed with ME and they're diagnosed with ME, then surely I should have this symptom too. Obviously, I'm not thinking this like consciously,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but something's going on deeper inside me, and I would end up with more symptoms. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And then when I left those groups, I was like, oh, I feel better. And it was just like, oh, that's interesting how if you're surrounded by people, especially because some people are positive, but I find as well for myself, my experience of those groups is sometimes somebody puts a positive thing on and someone will jump on and just kind of like demolish any positivity that they put in there.
yeah,
And that used to then get me down, because I'm like, I can't share those good days now. I've only got to share the bad. Like, and it was so when I left, I was like, oh, I feel better now because I can just say what I want.
yeah. I have heard about this, the groups, and everyone seemed to have very similar experiences. I mean,
Mm,
I have my own experience with them, and it's like, yes,
yeah, yeah,
very good intentions to begin with, but maybe different to actually being there.
yeah.
But my other question is also, do you feel, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but do you feel that maybe people are being diagnosed with the chronic fatigue syndrome more as an umbrella term, that maybe doctors
Oh,
don't really know?
yeah. So my belief is that they've basically tried all the tests and everything, and then when they all come back, so every single one of mine came back as normal. So on paper, I'm totally normal, and I'm like, my life is not normal. So then I think what happens is they don't know what to say or do. So then it's like, oh well, we've created this term now. So anybody that doesn't fit any sort of test, we're just going to put you here, which can lead to misdiagnosis as well, because of there could be. I know of one person that was diagnosed with ME, but ended up being something else, but it was quite rare. But because of they just didn't know, I think doctors just don't know what to do with us.
Mm,
So it just gets put under this term. Once you're under that term, you're left on your own to deal with it. That's it. I think the only help that I got was when I needed some painkillers, and when it got too bad. I'm not somebody that likes to take them anyway, but there were times when I needed them.
yeah.
But that was like the only times I would go back to the doctors, is because any other time I went back for, like, when you want something, you need somebody to help, you're trying to ask for help, and you
Mm,
go to the doctor. And I was leaving feeling like I was an inconvenience, and that I was sometimes leaving worse than when I came. And I was like, oh, I just don't want to put myself through it anymore. So
it's
yeah,
very
so that was a
challenging.
battle with the doctors, and it's not an easy place to be when they're supposed to be, we grow up knowing doctors will help you, and then when you go with something that they don't know what to deal with, and then you kind of feel brushed aside, then what you're left with, You're like, who else do I go to? No one else told us who else we could go to if we couldn't get it from the doctors.
But what you're saying is interesting, right? Because like you say, that there's no cure. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's no enough information about all of these things. And now really it's about I'm here by myself, and I guess getting into that really rock, hitting rock bottom is what actually eventually helps you to start seeking
Mm.
what is out there, what can I do, what other people, what stories are there, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was just listening to an interview with someone the other day, and he was saying that when he was diagnosed at a much later age than you, um, I guess I'm saying that because I think that at 16, it's even more overwhelming. I really do believe, and when you're
Mm.
slightly older, you can deal with it differently. But
Yeah.
when he was diagnosed, the doctors were saying it will last about 6 to 7 weeks, and so just basically hang on, basically it would be okay. And then he said actually it was more like 6 to 7 years before I realized that there are some things that I can do. So
Mm.
yeah. um so I think I interrupted you actually.
No. But yeah, that's what it is, isn't it? It's just, there's no, you can't, there's no date that anybody can put on it. I know people that have now recovered, but we were all in the same boat at one point where we were just like, it's never going to get any better. Because we truly believed it, because the doctors
Mm,
were like, this is it, this is your life, you just got to adjust around it. At the time, I didn't know anybody that had got a life after it. Everybody was just like, oh yeah, well, you might have like a year where you might feel okay, but then it's just going to come back. So then I believed them because I didn't know any different. So and I don't think if somebody had told me, they were like, oh yeah, do you know what, Katie, you will get better, I would have been like, no, I won't, because I believed so deeply that you couldn't.
and
So
that's something that I want to ask. Did you feel, was that question at some point of like, why me, and feeling
all the time,
all the
all the time. Like, why, what did I do to deserve this? Like, why is it so bad? Why have I got it worse than other people? Like, it would just go on and on and on. And you get so trapped in that mindset then, because it's like,
Mm,
woe me, poor me, is that victim mentality. Oh, I lived there for quite a while, I will tell you that. But I was happy there because that's what I knew. I didn't know
yeah.
any different. So I'm like, well, this is me. This miserable person is just who I'm always going to be. It's
I
just
was talking to someone, I don't know, I think she can't remember how our paths crossed, but I was saying yes, you can do things like, because I use energy healing to help people, to work with people, and she was like, she was adamant that that can be she cannot heal, and she said,
mm,
oh, I'm lying in bed for 20 hours a day, you can't help me. And I was thinking to myself, not with this attitude, I can't, I
yes.
but it was, I mean, I definitely understood her pain and guilt that she was in, but yeah, I knew that I couldn't help at that point.
Yeah, it's definitely, you have to want the help, don't you? You have to, you don't necessarily have to believe fully. For me, I didn't believe I would ever get my life back, but I
Mm,
believed that maybe I could get a little bit of something.
yeah,
Like, I just wanted a bit of energy to start with so I could feel like a mum again. That's all I was set out for. And then it turned out I managed to get my entire life back eventually. But it's funny because, like, to start with, that person, before that moment of feeling like I was actually going to be more than what I was at the time, there was no way I would have believed I could have had more energy, let alone have healed myself. Like, I was
yeah,
like, no,
yeah,
I would have
no,
punched you in the face. I would have told you to fuck off. I'd be like, no, absolutely not.
yeah. Well, I know that it's a cycle, right? I mean, you have
Yeah.
to. There has to be a point, like you're going to tell us in a minute, that
Mm,
the point where everything changes.
yeah.
So tell us, really. You say there was a spiritual woman that.
Mm,
Tell us
yeah.
about that.
So I was like sitting on the sofa, and I was like, at this time my tremors were really bad. I could barely move. I had to always have the wheelchair next to me on the sofa. We'd have to prep the day because everybody'd be out the house, so I would have to make sure I've got stuff nearby so I could have my lunch. So it's less movement, less energy being used. But it was like at that point, anytime I just moved on the sofa, it would just set it all off again, and it was so tiring and exhausting, and I just cry all the time. and I was so depressed, and I was just like, I just don't want to be here anymore. I don't know how to keep fighting anymore. And I was like lost in Netflix, because that was my escapism, to just fantasy something I could pretend that I was like, oh, in this world. And then I just had this moment sitting there, and I just felt like somebody was at the end of the sofa, and I was like, oh, that was really weird. And then I just had this, it's so hard to explain, but it's like I heard, you were destined for so much more than this, but it wasn't like somebody speaking to me like out like that. It's like it's my own voice in my head, but it also didn't feel like me. And I was like, this is the weirdest thing ever. But I felt it like as if like I felt it through every part of my being, through my cells. I just knew all of a sudden, like the belief in it was so powerful. And I was just like, I was almost like confused, and I was like, this is not matching with my vibe right now. But I also didn't know what to do with that either, because I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm destined for more, and then just sat there and cried some more and twitched some more. So it was just the weirdest thing, but it put into play that I was looking for something else, and good old Facebook and the way that it just brings things up, led me to this lady, and she also had ME, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just stalk her for a bit. And she was trying these new supplements, and I was like, do you know what, might as well give it a go. What have I got to lose? Like, it doesn't really matter. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And so that was my first step, to just go, fuck it, we'll give it a go. It was like I was so, do you know when you just kind of go, oh, we'll just see what happens, when you finally kind of surrender, and you're just, that's that moment where things start to change, I think, when you finally just let go and go, we'll see, we'll
Yeah,
just go with the
you just
flow.
can't get any more, so I'll just give it a go. But you mentioning supplements, but did the question of nutrition or food intolerances and stuff like that, did it ever come up before?
No, and I was really surprised that a doctor never kind of brought this up as well, especially when I started. So it started like the supplement side. It's basically fruit and vegetables dried in a capsule. Okay, that's literally what I started with. And then I was like, what do you mean? So I started after a week, I had more energy. I was prepared for like waiting 6 months before I felt anything,
Yeah.
because I was like, I've had it for so many years. I can't just suddenly feel better. But after a week, I was actually feeling like I had more energy, and over time, my tremors started to reduce a bit. Like they didn't go, but it was easier. And I was just like, why are we not told this about fruits and vegetables? And then I started changing my diet to more of a whole food based diet, whereas before it's just anything out of the freezer that I could just chuck in the oven. And I started to feel better again. And when I say feel better, it's not like I just suddenly wasn't fatigued anymore, but it was like I could manage better. I could manage the pains better. My pain actually reduced massively because I cut out dairy and wheat. And I was like, oh, is that seriously? I've been suffering with that because the pain was so severe, like stabbing pains. And I'm like, is that all I had to do? It was cut out a bit of dairy and a bit of wheat. And I got frustrated and angry about it, because I'd suffered for so many years and I could have done something about it, but nobody mentioned it to me.
But this is exactly it, right? It's awareness.
Yeah,
If you don't have the awareness, you just don't have it. But when you do
yeah.
have it,
You're
now
like,
you have the
what?
power. Yeah. But it is actually an interesting point. I think nearly half of my guests coming on this podcast mention at some point that, first of all, they say the doctors never said. I actually asked them, if food can cause it or can help produce it, and they all say no. And then, it really is. Everyone seems to be going through the journey that you have when you accidentally find out that could actually make such a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. It's a game changer, because then I was like, well, what else can I do? I'm like, good. And that was that point of opening that door of possibilities. Whereas before I was absolutely closed off to it. I was like, well, this works, so maybe there's something else that I can do. It's almost addictive, isn't it? Once you start to get a little something, it's
Mm.
like, well, what else is there? So I just started off wanting more energy, and then ended up with my entire life back. But it's just like, I couldn't have believed it back then. It was just step by step that I went into it. And I think I went into it very open minded, in like, oh, let's just try this, see if this works. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. And I think that helps because there's no expectations. So I can't really feel like I failed because I didn't really expect it to work anyway.
Yeah. But you know, this is interesting for me. I mean, with the kind of work that I do with people, I always think about what is the message behind, whatever people are going through.
Mm,
And with the fatigue, I know that it's that thing of, like you said earlier, I have feelings and I don't know, I can recognize them, and I have emotions I don't know how to deal with, but also I have to pretend and put everything else, like put a happy face on, and
mm-hmm.
it's that thing of, I'm so external in my behaviors that actually I don't see me. And
Yeah.
at some point, this is so exhausting that the brain, the body, the subconscious mind, they say,
Mm.
actually, if you don't do it, I'll do it for you.
Oh my
And
God, yes.
right, and now
Yeah.
and now you have to pause, and you can't otherwise, right? You're being forced to do something that you didn't realize that you could basically do for yourself, which is to pause and not say yes, and not be show everyone that
Mm.
you're happy all the time. So now you're saying also, I couldn't fail. That's another one of them,
Yeah.
right? It's that thing of the extra pressure that is kind of lurking at the back.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It was a fascinating sort of, when I looking back, I think it's more fascinating. Obviously at the time I was just like, woo, a little bit of energy. Um, but looking back, I'm like, wow. Like, and I think it annoys me more now as well for the fact that we're not taught things growing up like this. We're not taught about how to regulate our emotions or to notice when our body isn't feeling right, that we need to rest. We're so praised for pushing through all the time. And that's what I
Mm.
was doing. I was just pushing, pushing, pushing instead of, you know, obviously I didn't know at like 16, 18 that I was dealing with some very big emotions. Um, but to have gone, oh, okay, do you know what, mum, dad, I'm really struggling with the way that this is happening. Like, I feel like I'm being ignored. I feel like I'm not in any of these conversations. I couldn't dare say that back then.
Mm.
Like, no way. I would have been like, hello, like a little mouse. I would just be so scared.
I mean, but it's understandable, right? I
Mm,
mean, wait, I need to understand why they say it's understandable. Because what you're saying, which I definitely agree with, is that you should be encouraged to say something, not to just feel the fear of saying something. But I think it is understandable that, because I think at this age we all have that, right? It's I can't
mm,
I can't possibly say anything. Um, yeah, I confused myself now. I mean, I definitely would like this to be different, right? That we
yeah.
can share, at least, even if we can't say anything to our parents, that we find other ways to offload
Mm.
what we are feeling.
Yeah. And at the time, at that age as well, you can't really go to your friends because I think I did try at one point and be like, oh, I'm struggling, like at home or whatever. But they don't care at that age. They're like, oh, yeah, you'll be fine. Suck it up. Get over
Yeah,
it. I'm like, it doesn't work like that.
yeah. Or they say, "Oh, but you look fine."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And then you
yeah.
learn. Then you learn that you really do need to just keep up appearances and smile
Mm,
and all of that.
yeah.
Yeah. But let's go back to the, later date when you
Hmm.
started already getting some more energy. And when you said earlier, when you had that spiritual moment, you said that you, just sitting up in bed would start everything again. So actually, what was that? What was starting? Is it more pain, more discomfort, more?
Um, yeah, pain, but mostly it was the trauma. So the way that I explain it is like I looked like I was having an epileptic fit, but like being fully conscious of it. And there was a time where my dad had seen it, and I was like, well, this is what I've been telling you. This is what I experienced. But
Mm,
it was the first time he witnessed it because normally, like I say, I would only see people on a good day when I'm not so bad. But it was like a constant thing at this one point, and he rang the ambulance and he said, "You got it. They've got to do something." I was like, "They won't do anything." I was like, "Fine, I will go." So went in the ambulance, and even the guy in the ambulance, I think he'd been working as a paramedic for 17 years and said he'd never seen anything like me. I was like, "Great, thanks." But it was just that's what it was like. He said, "I've never seen anybody be so aware while literally looking like you're having an epileptic fit. I said, it is so draining and it's so exhausting. But then I become so afraid to move because it's like, do you know when you relax and you get that comfort? So I'll be on the sofa or something and I'm relaxed. I'm like, okay, we're good. But then I forget, like if I'm watching something, especially, I forget. So I'm like, oh, I feel a bit like do you know when you feel a bit numb in sitting in one place for too long? And I'll turn and then it would kind of set it all off again. And
Mm.
so I would start to spasm again. And then I'm like, ah, shit, why did I do that? Why am I so dumb? Like I would have all these conversations with myself, like you're so stupid and all this because of I forgot that I shouldn't have moved.
And it shows, right? It shows how you forget that you can have a life. You forget that there is some normality in life, and
Mm,
you find comfort in being okay for an hour, or being okay
yeah,
for sitting for a whole program without any symptoms. But it really is there, right? It's
yeah,
the challenges are there, the possibilities of not having them.
yeah, yeah.
But you of course have to have the awareness, which at this point you didn't have.
I did not, not
No,
at all. I
no.
bloody wish I did.
Yes, yes. I feel so. I feel it. When I think about how limiting everything is, and how
Mm,
it becomes the norm. But
yeah.
tell me. So let's go back to, so you had supplements, and then
Mhm.
what was the next thing that you tried?
Yeah, from there I did like meditation. I'd heard things about that. So I started doing that just to concentrate on my breathing more than anything it ended up being. And that then I learned things from doing the meditations that then helped with my anxiety so obviously I had to go get the kids from school. So there were days where I would have to like really focus on my breathing to get the kids so that I could get home, because there were times where I would go get the kids, I get back to the car and then it would all set off again. So I'd have to sit in the car for like 5 to 10 minutes, if not longer, and wait before I could drive home because it wasn't safe for me to drive home. And the
Mhm.
poor kids, they're so young as well. They're just sitting in the car playing, fighting, and I'm like, oh my God, I just got to get through the next few minutes. And it's draining, but like learning the breathing really helped. It would help. It didn't cure anything at that time. It was definitely just a coping mechanism
Yeah.
that allowed me to one, get out the house to even get the kids, get back to the house, and then I could like crumble. Whereas
Mhm.
I've had times where I've been at the school and like my legs would start to go, and luckily there was a couple of mums that would help me out, but it was so embarrassing. So then I also didn't want to do the school runs then. So my anxiety would become higher because then I was knowing I was going to the school run, but I didn't know how my body was going to be because it's never know. And
Mhm.
it just became this massive thing. And my whole day was geared up to just go and get the kids and back. Um, so meditation was a really good one, and mindfulness. And then I learned about gratitude and just finding those little positives in the day. So my common one was, oh, I made a cup of tea today because I love a cup of tea. So if I couldn't make a cup of tea that day, I'm like, damn, I've had a bad day. uh, so it was just that sort of thing, and then I started doing yoga as well, and so this is over like this happened over about 4 years, I think, 3 to 4 years of trying these little things, and yoga I found was the first sort of thing I could physically do that didn't wipe me out for like days, weeks, sometimes months if I ever tried like proper walking or running. So I was quite excited to find something, but it also made me feel better. And I was really surprised at how calm I actually felt by doing some yoga. And I did easy yoga. I didn't do fancy stuff. I did like where you just hold the position for like a good 10 breaths before you move to the next one. Um, but it was a start, and that I needed it. I needed it at that time. And in amongst that, I went to counselling as well, which is the first time I've ever spoken to anybody about anything that I was going through. But I totally did lie in my counselling sessions sometimes. I was like, I can't. He'll judge me. That's what I thought. I mean, he'll judge me. I can't tell him the truth.
Right. Well, but this fear of judgment is exactly what we were saying earlier as well, right? It's
Yeah.
the need to the front, and to not allowing to open up, and to let out some of these
Mm,
pressures.
yeah. Yeah. So that was a good chunk of like a couple of years, or just slowly getting something back. It was like a better quality of life, but like I said earlier, you get addicted and you're like, but I want more. I want to be even better. I want to be able to go for a walk was one of my things. I just want to get out of the house. But I was so scared to go anywhere, and I'd always have to make sure my mum was with me. My mum is my rock. She was always there through everything. And she cleaned my house, God knows how many times, because I couldn't do it. And I found then I don't even know how. Do you know when something happens, you're like, I don't even know how I ended up doing it. That's so sort of divine and universally guided that I don't even know. I do not recall buying a tarot deck, right? But I remember sitting there with it, and I play. I had no idea what I was doing, playing around, and I'd be like, and then I read the booklet. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. And all of a sudden, then, as Facebook does, provides me with someone. And she was a medium, and she did all the spiritual things. I was like, I'll have a reading with her. That'll be interesting and fun. And oh, she was so good that I was crying. I was like, how do you know this? But she also said, oh, you've got some cards. And I was like, have you been stalking me? And she was like, you need different ones. The ones you got aren't, you're not getting. I was like, no, I could just keep reading the booklet all the time. I haven't got a fucking clue what I'm doing. And so she was guiding me and stuff. And then she ended up doing a spiritual development course. I was like, oh, do you know what? That'll be interesting. I'm quite interested in this sort of stuff. I'm a massive skeptic. But at the same time, I'm like, ooh, but what if? So my curiosity totally got me. And it led me down the most wonderful path ever, because I started there, and I started with the cards and reading for people, and I just enjoyed it. It was something to do for myself, and people loved it as well. And I was like, I was so upset. I got so many decks, I cannot tell you. I have actually created my own deck since then, because I love them so much. But it sent me then to, I was doing meditation one day. So my meditation had gone from just like concentrate on breathing to spiritual meditation. So I was going on these journeys, and I was doing all this, and I was healing. I felt I was crying a lot like, as I went through them. But I found that one day I was doing it, and I was like looking for guidance of like, because obviously I was like, what next? What else can I do? And it was Reiki was the thing that I had that came up. I had not even heard of it. I didn't know what it was. So it was me Googling it. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I don't understand what it is, but I feel like I want to know more. So I got a book, read a book, found somebody that was local that taught it. And so I didn't even like try it first necessarily. I just went straight in and learned about it. And because I was just like, well, I'll practice it while I learn it. Like I'll just feel it then. But it was something that helped me physically feel more peaceful. It was just like, it was an opening for me, I think. Like I didn't need to understand it, although part of me did. The logical part of me was like, yeah, but where's it coming from? What is it? What's it?
Yeah.
How's it doing it? But at the same time, I would fight with myself and be like, no, okay, we're doing this because you know it makes you feel better, and we're just exploring. So I just started doing it on people, and I was learning my intuition at the same time, because I was like picking up things, and then I just tell them, because I'm like, obviously I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm learning this, and this is what I felt. So it was definitely this back and forth so I could learn. And they'd be like, oh my God, how do you know that? And they just little things. And I was like, well, that was it. Set me off then. I was like, I'm so excited. I want to be in all the spiritual things. And I did. I learned everything I possibly could about like the chakras and the energy systems. And I was just obsessed with everything I could find out. I wanted to know, because I was like, how can I use this for myself as well? But I was also really wanting to help other people at the same time. So I was doing the two together of just learning, and anything I learned, I was like, can I do it on you? And it was great. And but then that led me then to sound healing, which I am obsessed with. I cannot tell you how much I love it. The vibrations, and just how our body just it just knows what it needs, and learning that side of it was just fascinating to me. And it was the first thing I did where, so it was very rare that I would know my tremors were coming, but sometimes I would kind of feel it coming up through my skin. It was the most uncomfortable feeling ever. And it would also strike fear in my heart, because I'm like, where am I? Can I sit down somewhere? You know, if I'm out and about, it's the worst possible thing. And I was on my sound healing course and I was like, oh no. I was like on day 3 and I was like, I'd done so well and I could feel it brewing. And then we had to like practice the gongs on each other. And this lady started doing the gong over me. And for the first time ever, it was like, do you know, like a volcano? It was like it was on the brink of erupting, and then it just eased right back down, settled, and they never came out. And I was like, that got me then, because nothing had helped. Nothing had done anything like that for me before. So I again became obsessed. I have an addiction to things, I think. Anything that's like will make somebody feel better, I'm like, yes, I want to know.
But I want to ask a question first.
Go on.
You know, what I, again, based on conversations I'm having with people, this idea of, well, this, you know, the victimhood, the feeling like a victim, like why me and all of that. I know that, you know, a lot of the time you can get better and you can do things and you can already be, you know, seeing proofs that things are working for you. But the grain, that thing of, you know, the victimhood is still there somewhere lurking again in the shadows. How did you let that go? How did you say, actually, I don't need that anymore?
That was a hard one, really hard, because around the sort of time I was doing the sound healing, I also was learning about that sort of themes of consciousness and how we kind of like fear being the like the one of the biggest ones, but also the shame, and I started learning about all those, and I realized that anytime I felt like I was getting better, I would always end up going backwards. So it was definitely a roller coaster through learning all this. So I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm good, I'm doing well. And then I'd crash and I'd be like, I knew it. I shouldn't have believed in myself. I shouldn't have had hope. And then I'd go up again. I'm like, oh no, we're okay. And it was like that all the time. And then I got to this point when I was learning about, it was about sort of like our beliefs then, and about myself and who I thought myself to be, and realized that one, I just had no identity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I just classed myself as Emmy and I became Emmy. That was it. And so then I'm like, well, who am I if I'm not ill? So this is why I kept circling back around, because I didn't know who I could be without an illness. So therefore, that scared my sort of unconscious into, oh, I need to protect you. So to protect you, we need to be poorly again, because we know how to live there. We know how to work from here. And I spent 2 years in that state of fear, of trying to be successful, of trying to do more, of trying to help more people. But I kept telling myself, but if I have people come to me, then it's going to be too much. I won't be able to do it. I won't have any energy again. And then we're going to go backwards. And then you're going to be so angry with yourself again. And it was just this constant battle within
The upper
myself.
limit, I think they call it.
Yeah. And it was just, I felt like a bully to myself. That's what I felt like. And so then it's also a battle between your beliefs then of like, which one do I want the most? And when I learned with the fear, that the next sort of step was, I can't remember now. I think it was to grieve. And I was like, yeah, I haven't grieved who I was, because I kept thinking I needed to go back to who I was. But I can no longer go back to that version of Katie. She doesn't exist anymore. She's grown. She's got a lot of wisdom since then. She's failed many a time as well. But you know, that's needed. That's how we learn. And I needed to learn to grieve that person who was the athlete, who felt full of energy, who had a family unit that was together, and like the way that I perceived that to be at that time. And it was definitely something that helped to take some time to just go, I don't need to be that anymore. I don't need to be hurt. I just need to figure out who I want to be moving forwards. And I know I don't know who that is right now, but I'm willing to find out. And I think that was the biggest thing of a switch to go, no, I am willing to find out. But there were still battles as I went through it, obviously, because again, that little voice creeps back in every now and then. But yeah, I did some coaching as well, and that helped just to voice things, just to get things out that is otherwise they just spiral around my head. And I find for me, if I just have a good chat with somebody, I'm like, oh, that feels better. Now I can think properly.
Yeah. You need to hear yourself say
Yeah,
it to lay it out. I understand that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I then led on to NLP, the Neuro Linguistic Programming, and that was my game changer as in my symptoms. So I went and learnt it, and on the course we did a belief change, and I literally came back and I didn't have any symptoms. Never had symptoms again since then. And I was already fascinated by the mind by that point anyway. And I was reading about it, and I realized I'd already connected how I was so many self-fulfilling prophecies that were going on in my life
Mm.
because of the beliefs that I had or the past experiences that I had. Therefore, my brain was telling me, yes, this will happen again, even though it probably won't. And
Mm.
that was something I found so fascinating. But what I also found was it was so focused on the mind that I didn't deal with any of the emotions. So I spent a year after that having to deal with the emotions. So physically I was fine.
Mm.
Emotionally, I was like not okay. I was
Yeah.
still dealing with a lot that just was kind of like it's almost like it separated me. Like I was instead of being this big mumble of mess that I was originally, it's like it split the mind and split the emotions.
Mm.
The mind was okay. It now knew not to like set the tremors off. It knew we didn't need the symptoms, but my emotions was still living in it and bubbling around me. So I found that like depression, anxiety found me once again. And it was again that sort of battle of and working through that. So I went to coaching, which definitely helped to just kind of really cry it out was one of them. I just needed a good cry. And to recognize that the emotions are just as important as what the mind is sort of perceiving and sort of programmed into. And then I spent time then for like when I was working with people, I wanted it to be all together. I was like, we are no longer looking at just this or just that. We are
Mm.
one. Um, and it took me a while to find myself in how to do that, because everything I was taught was so separated and everything that I just kind of wanted to bring them all in. It's you know, just I'm like, well, this is all the stuff I've learned. I want to put it all together.
Mm.
Um, and by doing that, the changes came so much quicker for people that I worked with. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But then I was like, why are we not doing this from the start? Why are we not looking at a person as a whole and going, okay, what trauma have you been through?
It's funny, right? This is what we're saying about the awareness. You definitely had to go through the journey to be where you are now, right? And
Yes, definitely.
it's and this is what I always say as well is because there is in every situation really like you to know there is a gift and there is a message and
Mm.
then there's a
Yeah,
gift and if you're not looking at it, if you're not looking for it, then you always stay where you are. But when you say actually, like you said, right, there's more. You're meant for more.
yeah,
And then you start with curiosity and with trying out things, and then you can look back and say, oh, now I understand. Maybe it didn't.
yeah,
Maybe it took a little bit longer than I wanted, or maybe it stayed in that, the
yeah.
victimhood and the the symptoms longer than I wanted. But once I
Mm.
go on that new path, look where I am today, right? And
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wouldn't change any of it because of when I got ill, that's when I met my husband. When I very first started getting poorly, because I went out drinking all the time because there was nothing else I could do. Um, but that's when I met him, and I was like, well, if I didn't get ill, I would never have met him. I wouldn't have my kids. So that straight away is worth all the pain. It's worth it all.
yeah,
But at the same time, my other part of my brain was like, was it lying? Like it's still there, niggling away. I'm like, yes, it was. Yes, it was.
and tell me, I know that you also got a book. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah. So the book is I wanted, well, I did have a few people just asking what did I do, and I'm like, oh, there's so much. I
Mm.
can't really just say it was one thing. So I ended up writing a book. One because where I was, I would have read a book, but I wouldn't have gone to healing. So there would have been so many excuses that I would have used to have not gone to healing at that time. And so I thought a book is a nice way to kind of start a point, because there was so many books that I read that was just started to open my mind a bit more to a possibility of something else. And I also found with some of the books that I read were just boring. It's like, as in, like, it was information based, and I'm like, yes, this is great at some points, but I like a story. That's who I am. Because like I'll read a fictional book all the time, but when it came to things, I found memoirs were the ones that I liked the most because it is somebody's story. But I do like knowledge. Like, I love learning things, and I always want to tell people and teach people. So I also wanted that in it. So it took a while to figure out what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. And I did kind of not necessarily rewrite it, but there was a big shift of like shifting things around because I really wanted my story woven throughout it. So I literally take you on my journey from the very beginning, and the cause, the effect, everything that I learned. Like I put in there practices that like I still do. Emotional, I put in the emotional wheel as well because of I still have to get that out sometimes because I'm like, which one is this?
Yeah, what am I feeling right now?
Yeah, sometimes it just takes a while for me to just go, oh yeah, no, there can be more than one thing going on here. But yeah, so and then I've put my actual sort of, so for some of them I've literally put the questions I asked myself and the answers that I did. Like, I've got my journals out and I've written it in there in bits and pieces, just so that people can relate, I think, because that's what I like. So I just made the book something that I would have wanted, that I could have connected to. I'm going to say, though, if you don't like colourful language, it's not a book for you because there's definitely swearing in it. Because I wanted it to be, I want you to hear my voice. Like, I want you to feel like I am literally just telling you my story. And as you can see, I can't do that without swearing, apparently. So it is very much, it's raw. It's the most honest I've ever been in anything. Like, it's got all my deep, dark secrets in there, things I hadn't told people. I had to have a conversation with my mum about one or two things because I was like, I don't want you to just read the book and be like, what the fuck? When did this happen? I don't know any of this. So there was some hard conversations that had to be had while I went through it. But do you know, they say like writing a book is healing? It is, but I'm also going to tell you it is really fucking hard, as in emotionally, to go back through it. I had to deal with a lot of stuff that I thought I dealt with. I didn't. I had to go back through that as I wrote it, and I had to take time off every few months because it hit so hard in some places. I even went through a really bad depression at one point because of some realizations that I had, and I was like, oh my god, this is really hard. Like, why am I doing this to myself? But I am proud of it. I am proud of it. I do. I love the book. There's humor in it, obviously, because I don't know how not to do that. But it's also, like I say, it's honest and raw. So I wanted to put it all in there, but I also don't want to just make somebody cry the entire time and be like, I'm not reading this anymore. I want to feel the humor because that's how I lived. Like, that's how I got through. It was a coping mechanism. It's my humor. I think if I didn't have it, I probably would be here right now. Let's be honest. So I think that's why I wanted it in the book as well, because that's how I lived my life.
And this book, that sounds very fascinating, and I'll be sure to get it as well. Tell me, so is it one of the links that you've shared with me already? And the links will be at the show
I
notes?
don't know. I'd have to, not
Okay, so,
sure. Because I'm not sure if it was published when we first spoke, because it got published in July. But it's called Chronically Awesome, as I find hilarious. And it is available on Amazon. So it's, at the minute, it is available as paperback. It is also Kindle, and I put it on Kindle Unlimited. And then I'm hoping to eventually do an Audible version as well. Because I know when I was ill, like reading, you know, it's fatigue. There's short chapters because of this as well. Because I know that for me personally, I have to get to an end of a chapter before I can put a book down. Because I feel like they just can't otherwise. So I made them short chapters so that it was easier for people to go, oh, I can rest now.
But I mean, I guess when you do the audio version, that's really right. People will really hear you, and
because my husband said, why don't you just get somebody to do it? I was like, well, no, because I know my own sarcasm. I know where I need to be like really sarcastic when I'm saying it out loud.
Yes. Katie, this has been completely fascinating. I loved every minute of our conversation. But before I say goodbye, what is one thing that you think, do you know what? This is my message. One thing that I want everyone listening, viewing to know, to go away with, to share with their friends. No pressure.
Yeah, I think it is to start just getting curious, I suppose. To if you can, to sit there and go, do you know what, everything I believe may not be true. Just to start a little seed of doubt within yourself.
Start small. Everything I
Yeah,
believe is not true.
yeah.
Start small.
Everything you believe is not true. It's a lie. They're all just because, like, this is what I learned is like everything we are is based on who we grew up with and what we saw, what we absorbed, how we were taught to, all these different things. And then we just became those things, so an expression of that. And so that's not actually something I chose for myself because I was too young to choose it for myself. So that was something that was fascinating to learn. And then I'm like, oh, what do I want to choose? Like, do I want to be Katie? Because I didn't pick that name. Well, obviously I do. I like it. But it's just interesting and fascinating to me. Like, I was taught that there is no other way. Doctors are the only way that you can heal. Well, no. You can do many different things. You've got to find what works for you, I think. I think that's the thing. Find what works for you and then, throw some beliefs up in the air as you do it.
And I think I want to also add to that, I guess, my own message.
Yeah.
Is about, don't settle. You really are
Yeah.
meant for more. So
Yes.
go and find your method. You will find your method. You will find your modality. You will find your path. But
Mm.
don't settle. I think that's based on your the conversation with you today.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
together we come up with great things.
Yeah.
So all of your information is going to be on the show notes, so people can find if they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do recommend buying the book. It sounds fantastic. I definitely want to get my hands on it. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and your wisdom and inspiring us. I think that was fabulous. Thank you
Oh,
so much for being here.
well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I will just say one more thing to anyone listening or viewing. Please, share this, like, subscribe, rate, I don't know, whatever, but share the message. People need to hear this. And if you are here, it's no coincidence. There is things here that you meant to hear. So let's spread the word, not the world, also the world. Thank you.